Hey, it's Jess, and this is The Heartcore Home, the podcast for moms who are healing, unlearning, and trying not to lose their minds while raising good humans. Let's get into it. Tell us a little bit about yourself. It doesn't have to be, the cookie cutter, like, hi, this is who I am. Just whatever you want us to know, whatever you're comfortable telling us, let us get to know you.
My name's Jessica. I am a mom of 6 and just recently a nana. My daughter had a baby. I am a business owner, a content creator. I wear many hats. But a little bit about me, my husband and I are high school sweethearts. We actually got pregnant with our oldest when I was a senior in high school and he had just graduated and got married a month later. So we got married at 17 and 18 years old. Had our oldest when I had just turned 18 when I had my oldest. And then in 2005, we were pregnant with our second child. And at 37 weeks, he stopped moving. And so he was stillborn. That was probably the hardest trial that we've gone through to date, obviously. Yeah. And then we had our son a year later. And then I was done being pregnant. I didn't want any more kids. It was just a lot of anxiety throughout Kernan's pregnancy. And then when he went off to kindergarten, I was like, I am too young to sit at home by myself. So maybe we're not done. So we had our daughter, who's now 13. And then I have always wanted to adopt. It's like been a dream of mine since I was about probably 5 or 6 years old. And so we started seriously talking about it. Like we had talked about it our whole marriage, but we were like, well, we wanted one more. Let's look into adoption. And little did we know I was like 3 weeks pregnant with our son at the time. So then we had MacGyver, and he lives up to his name a little too well. And so then my husband's like, well, now we're done. And I was like, I'm not done. If anything, I just want to try for adoption.
Right.
If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But if I don't at least try, I'll regret it my whole life, you know? And so we started looking into it. We went to foster care meetings, and I knew my heart couldn't handle that. Like, I couldn't handle giving them back. And maybe now I could, where I know my family's complete. But anyways, so we just looked into all different options and we ended up adopting our youngest. So that's a little bit about our family.
That's amazing. What's one thing that you would say that you notice people really don't talk about when it comes to adoption?
Oh man, I think adoption can get a hard rap. So in my circumstance, our little boy we adopted from Liberia, Africa. I have always wanted to adopt from Africa. So my great-grandparents, those like commercials when we were little where they're like, sponsor a child and whatever. So my great-grandparents did that, and they sponsored a child for every member of our family. And so I can remember being at their house like super little, and when they would pay their monthly due, whatever, they would lay out all of the kids' pictures and everything, and they would pray over them. And I just remembered looking at my mom one time saying, I'm going to adopt one of those kids someday. And so I've always wanted to do it. And then, like I said, we looked into foster care, we looked into all of that, and it just, nothing panned out. And so the other thing that enticed us to Africa is when our little boy passed away, they brought him back with a stuffed giraffe. And so giraffes hold a special meaning to our family. And so another pull to Africa. The big thing was finding countries that are open to America, because not all of them are. Like, a lot of them have gotten blamed for trafficking. So like you can adopt like the big ones like Kenya, Uganda, like none of those Americans can adopt from. So then we had to find countries that were open to adoption. And so we actually talked to a company, an agency about South Africa. But South Africa's rules are if you have 4 children, you can't adopt. Well, we had 4 children.
Right.
So anyways, so then we ended up looking into Liberia. Never heard of Liberia before this, but once we found an agency that worked with Liberia and we talked to them, everything just fell into place. It all just started to work out. But I think the one thing that I've been surprised the most about is all the backlash of white families adopting Black children, or our family being white saviors. Like, we're savior complex. We went over to Africa to save him. That's been a huge adjustment, I guess, is having that. We started the process actually I love the app Time Hop. It's the greatest app ever. But on my time hop yesterday was a picture of the application for the agency that we used, my scriptures, and a pen. And I took a picture right before I started filling out the application, and that was 6 years ago yesterday. So that's when we started the process, was in 2019, April of 2019. And we got approved to move forward with our agency at the beginning of May. And at this point, you don't know who you're matched with. Like, you have no idea who they're going to match you with. And so I started my Instagram, like, so I could keep people updated about our adoption. I used it to like advertise fundraisers, whatever. And when we were matched with him in April of 2021. So it took 2 years to get matched. And that's because of paperwork. Like, you have to do all this paperwork, and then you have to wait for people to complete their job to do it with your paperwork. And then you have to do more paperwork, and then wait for people to complete their job with paperwork. So it's just time consuming, all of that. So we got matched with him in April of 2021. And then at that point, all of our paperwork that they've gathered has to be taken to the Liberian government. And they do their own investigation into if the child really is an orphan, if, birth parents, if they're in the picture, if they're not getting paid to put their child up for adoption. In Liberia, they work on Liberia time. So like, what takes
I've
us
heard that
3
with
weeks?
Africa. I've
Oh
heard
my
that,
gosh.
definitely.
It's a real thing. They're like very chill. And don't care.
Right.
So like, what takes us 3 weeks takes them 3 months. Like, it's absurd.
My pastor tells this story of like when he did missions, I believe in Kenya. And we had one of the pastors there come and visit, and he had said he got there and no one was there to pick him up. And of course, he was like young at the time. He's like, I didn't have like a phone. I didn't have, like all these things. I didn't know what to do. And when they finally got there, like hours later, he's like, I didn't know if you were coming. And he's like, I'm here now. So it's like this running joke of like, I'm here now.
Yeah. And it's seriously, it's so true. Like, we were late for almost everything. And I am like, if I'm not 2 to 5 minutes early, I'm late. And so, oh my gosh, it drove me crazy. So anyways, so they got all of our paperwork in April, and we found out in the end of August that we were cleared and we could go and pick him up. So originally, when we started all of this, it was going to be my husband and I were going to go over and get him. And you have to stay there for like 3 to 4 weeks.
Oh, wow.
Because you go over there, you go to court the next day in Liberia, and he's legally yours. So we took him home. But then you have to go through the process of applying for his US visa to be able to come home, right? And so originally it was just going to be my husband and I, like, we'll go get him, bring him home. And then as time went on, we were like, if we were to go just the two of us, there's no amount of pictures or videos or stories that our kids would really understand where he came from and what he lived like and why we did what we did.
And it's their experience too.
Yeah. So we decided to take everybody. So in November, we left the week of Thanksgiving, November 2021, and we were there for 4 weeks. We came home the week of Christmas, and it was the greatest month ever.
So cool too. Like, bring this baby home for Christmas.
Yeah. So he was 3, so he wasn't really a baby.
He's a baby. That's a baby. They're all babies. They could be 19 and they're babies. Bring my baby home.
It's so true. But yeah, it was the greatest month. It was awesome because like now looking back, like, yes, we wanted our kids to experience it, but it's like there was no outside influence. There were no friends. There were no like jobs. There was no, you didn't have to be anywhere. Like, it was just our family for a month. And so by the time we came home, he knew who his people were.
Right.
Whereas if we had come home with him and we're like, these are your siblings, and then friends from down the street come over and sis leaves for work, and like they come and go.
It's confusing.
Who are my people? And he didn't have any siblings, so he really didn't know what a brother and a sister were. He had been in the orphanage for 11 months when we went and got him. And so anyways, so it was great. It was like the best decision. All the parents that I talk to now, I'm like, if you can swing it and afford it, take your whole family. Like, you won't regret it.
It is such an expensive process. I think that's one of the things that people do talk about a lot, is like how it's so expensive. And like, I understand why there's a process and why it does cost a lot. It's like that buy-in, that making sure that people are not in it for the wrong reasons. And, but it's like the people who really want it and then can't afford it, it's heartbreaking for that side of it too.
Yeah, I will say domestic adoption is more expensive. Most adoptions, you have to have all of the money up front. So like $60,000, you have to have all of that money up front. Whereas with international adoption, it was we had to pay so much for our application. And then we had to pay so much to the agency for them to represent us. And then, like there was chunks of money needed, like so much to USCIS, the government, to do their paperwork, and so much to, anyways. So it was more manageable because we didn't have to have all of this money right up front. So that was great. That was super helpful. There's also grants out the wazoo that you can get to help pay for that. We used Adoption Airfare. So they get airfare cheaper. They're a nonprofit. And so that was super helpful. But it still cost us about $55,000 to $60,000 all said and done. So it's definitely not cheap. It's doable. If it's meant to be, if it's the Lord's will, it all falls into place. Like the money comes when you need it. So, because we're not rich at all, like we're just your typical middle class family. And we did not have this big chunk of money that we could use for this. Right. But we did fundraisers and everything else, and it all just came when it needed to be there. So
now that you say that with the grants and those things, like it totally makes sense, but it's not something I would have thought about, I think, on my own. But now that you say it, I'm like, well, of course, like they want to help people. There's always something to help people, but it's definitely not something like if I was just now like, I'm going to adopt a kid, I would have never, I'd be like, where's that money coming from? Because I don't have it. Or,
Yeah.
I wouldn't think about like, okay, where can I go to get that help for it?
And I think that's the most daunting thing for a lot of people. I think there's a lot of people that are like, oh, I'd love to adopt.
Right.
But then it's the financial that just stops them and scares them. And I'm like, don't let it scare you.
Right.
That's totally possible.
I have thought about that, about adopting, and I've always kind of thought about that. I'm just like, I'm an emotional being, but like postpartum has always been so hard that I decided I was done at 3 kids. And my dad's always like, well, you could still adopt. I'm like, yes, I could.
I will say, like, adopting through foster care, there's like no cost, to be honest. But if you can handle the emotional roller coaster of a broken system, more power to you.
Right.
But I knew I couldn't do it.
Yeah. I know. I like to think I could. I don't know that I could. Like
I think I
seeing
could.
that unjustness and like,
I think I could now, like I said, because my family's complete and I know it, And so if it meant that these kids came to my house and they experienced love, stability, for the short time that they were here, and I would hope that they would go back and like fall back on that if they needed to in their future or remember what it felt like or whatever. I think I could do it now, but I couldn't when we started this process. There was no way. So
I think, yeah, like wanting to care for somebody and then having to go through that process of giving them back or not being able to like move forward. Like it's not so much about the giving care. It's the fact that the system is broken that I would be stuck on. Like, because I actually was in foster care for a little bit when I was younger and my parents were going through their separation. And so like, I can give all the love. I'm really good with that. Like I was a Girl Scout leader and all the things, like, and I worked for a school, but like knowing that it's broken, like I feel like it would just end up making me so mad. And then I would like feel like I had to do something, and like, how could I advocate more for that? Because like, it is. And like, even just being in the education system for a while, like I saw that, like the broken side of that. And that alone was like, how are you serving these kids? And
yeah,
so
which is why I homeschool my 3 little kids.
Yeah, I started homeschooling my oldest when she was 4, actually, because she was like ahead of the curve. And I was like, well, I don't want to put her in kindergarten and have her like bored and then like getting in trouble or whatever. And so I started early, but then I happened to get an online job as a para and then, went into parent coaching and all the things. And I've always been to the like psychological side of things. And so once I got in there, I was like, okay, we're supposed to be doing it different.
Yeah.
Where is this happening? And there were so many conversations that came up. And so I know from that experience that if I was involved with the other system, that it would be very hard for me to like separate that and not make it a personal thing.
Me too. That's why I'm like, I just don't. Props to the parents that do it. And there's some amazing people out there that do it. And I admire them, but I don't know. I just don't think I can do it.
I actually just said that to one of the people that I was working with. She adopted her daughter, and I think her daughter was 14 when she adopted her, or somewhere like that. She used to be her teacher, and she ended up adopting her, and they're going through a hard time still, and she's got a lot of struggles from like her past and her trauma. And I told her the other day, I said, if no one has told you, like, I am so proud of you, because that is a very hard thing, and the majority of people want to run from it and say, well, you're like, you could get hurt, you're an elderly person, or this or that. And she's like, it doesn't stop my love for her just because she's going through a hard time. I'm her mother. And, when it comes to adoption, I think that sometimes there's those lines that get blurred and people think, well, not really, but she's like, no, 100%, I'm all in for her. So whatever that looks like, I'm going to be there.
I think that's another misconception with adoption. I think everybody thinks that adoption is so hard and like you never bond with the child.
Right.
Right. And I know there's families that have adopted from Liberia that I talk to, and there are some of them where they've had serious struggles since coming home, and it's hard, especially because adopting from an international country, you don't know what they've gone through. Whereas in our system, there's usually like this list of everything that they've been through. And for Africa, you have no idea. Like you assume, but there's so much the sexual abuse that starts at a young age in international countries and even in our country too. But so there are a ton of that, you're never going to bond with them. Yeah. And we're super, super fortunate in the sense that Benson was meant to be in our family. Like there's no question in my mind. He just came a different way because he fits in perfectly. And it's funny to watch him because he would not have made a good oldest child and he would not make a good only child. Like being the baby of the family is exactly where he needs to be, and the bond of him and my 9-year-old is I don't even really know how to describe it, but they call themselves best brothers and they literally can't do anything without the other. MacGyver will go to work with my husband on some days, and Benson's bored out of his mind. And when he gets home, you would think he had been gone for over a week, the way that he attacks him. And so it is possible to bond with your child.
Right. And I always like to tell people, even in a regular family dynamic, sometimes there's stages of life that are harder and whatever that looks like. And especially in the area I'm in, there's a lot of drug use and stuff like that. And it's a very rural area. And so there's not a lot to do. So a lot of families fall into those things. And I just keep telling them that it's never going to be too late to build a connection. The behaviors might already be there, but you're never going to wake up and be like, man, I wish I hadn't put the time and energy into my kid. Even if they're 30 and you're never going to regret that decision to build up that connection. And it's never too late to build that connection. Sure, it might look different than if you had the attachment from when they were a baby or carried them or whatever, but you can always build some kind of an attachment, and you can always heal the attachments too, when you have that consistent connection building, relationship.
Yeah, for sure.
So you mentioned that you've wanted to do this since you were 5. And I was that way as wanting to be a mom. I always knew I wanted to be a mom.
Me too. That was when, what job do you want to be when you grow up?
Yes.
A mom.
I was I don't care as long as I'm a mom and I can take care of my kids.
Yeah.
I want to ask you this because I've definitely had these moments what am I doing? Especially postpartum and things like that. But was there ever a moment where you got to a point where you're I don't know, or you doubted that you were cut out for it?
For being a mom or for adopting?
I guess both, but we're talking adoption. So I was thinking adoption, but yeah, I guess both.
I think the one time that I had the biggest, is this really what we're supposed to be doing, was in the waiting. Because like I said, we started in 2019 and we weren't matched until 2021. Do I think that COVID played a role in that? No. First of all, Benson didn't get into the orphanage until December of 2020, and I know he was meant for us. And so we just had to wait for that process. But the waiting was the worst. And just the self-doubt, why are we waiting so long? And is this really what we're supposed to be doing? Why isn't this happening faster or whatever? It was the waiting. Since getting home, I have not had any question that we were supposed to do what we were supposed to do. So Benson has a cool story, actually. So with our agency, they will call you and say, we've got a match that we'd like to talk to you about. And so you get on a Zoom call with them and they're like, okay, this is the situation. this is a little bit of his story. Do you want to proceed? Like, they don't want you to get too attached and then just be, yes. So they tell you a little bit and then they say, do you want to proceed? And then they tell you a little bit more. Do you want to proceed? And so after they've told you like his whole story, then they're like, okay, do you want to see a picture? And so you can decide from that point, like, maybe this isn't the right one for us or, whatever. And so like we said, yeah, we want to see his picture. And so then we took about 5 days just to talk about it, pray about it, talk to our kids about it. It's funny because, this had been my dream for years. And so I thought for sure when I saw this little boy's picture, I was going to be like, yeah, that's my kid. That's who I'm supposed to adopt. And that didn't happen.
Yeah, it's like that, like how the like movies portray it. Like you just see them and you just know, and it's
Yeah.
like, yeah.
Yeah.
And they do that with like with just having babies in general. Like, oh, you're gonna have your child and you're immediately gonna bond with them and be like, oh, this is my baby. And not every mother experiences that in that sense either. But that's how they portray it. Like you see them and you just know.
Well, like I said, I just thought like this was my dream. I was gonna know,
Right.
and that just didn't happen. Like I thought he was adorable, don't get me wrong, but I didn't have that like he's my kid. And so after a couple of days of just my husband and I kind of stewing on it ourselves, we told the rest of our kids and we asked them, we want you to go and pray about it tonight and see if you get an answer. So at the time, our oldest was 18 and she and my sister, who's 4 years older than her, they lived together. So she went back to her apartment and prayed about it. And anyways, she called us the next morning and she was like, I had the craziest dream. She was like, I dreamt that we went over there and we picked him up and we brought him home. And like, she was like, it was so vivid. And then I woke up that morning to a text message from a coworker, an old coworker, asking if there was any update on our adoption. She was like, why that day? Why that moment? And she was like, Mom, he's supposed to be ours. So she got that clear, like, yeah, that's my brother. And you want to know what's crazy is those two have an amazing bond. Like from day one, he just was immediately attracted to Macy, more so than our other kids, even MacGyver. At first, MacGyver, our 9-year-old, and him, they fought a lot because in the orphanage, the kids his age, they would fight over the toys or the soccer ball or, like you had to claim what was yours. And so he and MacGyver, there was one time actually in our apartment in Africa where MacGyver came in crying because he had taken something and we were like, MacGyver, you're going to have to hit him back. You're going to have to show him that you're the older brother. Because here he had been the youngest for 6 years, he didn't know how to be a brother. And so then not more than 20 minutes later, we had Benson coming to us in our room crying, he hit me. And we were like, well, now I guess, so like they kind of went at it. And even when we got home, MacGyver had a really hard time adjusting at first. Again, he had been the youngest for 6 years. Now there's this boy in his house that wants to play with all his toys because they were his for.
Yeah.
And so, but my oldest and Benson had a super good relationship. But
like that, establishing that pecking order.
Exactly. But anyways, so when we left for Liberia, I had like 750 followers on my Instagram, and it was pretty much close family and friends, like just keeping up with our adoption. And while we were in Africa, I posted a reel, which I had done lots of times, but it blew up. Like it's been viewed like 17 million times or something like that. And so with that came a large following. And I was like, I don't know what to do with this following. Like how I didn't ask for this. I didn't anyway, it was very like sticker shock, right? But through that, I received a message. I received a lot of messages, hateful messages, lovely messages, but I received a message from this girl and she said, I have a weird question, but were you matched with Fode, which is his Liberian name? And I said, yeah, we were. And she goes, okay, you're going to think I'm crazy, but we are also adopting through the agency that we used. And she said, we were matched with him. And after praying about it, we just felt strongly that he was not who was meant to come to our family. Like he isn't who the Lord wanted to join our family. And so we told them no. Okay, first of all, I don't know how you could do that.
Right.
Like that would be so hard. Like they had waited just as long as us to be matched, longer actually. They started the process first. And then to be able to follow the Spirit so profoundly and say, no, like he's not meant to be ours. And I didn't message her. I'm like crying, right? And I messaged her back and I'm like, I want you to know that you 100% did the right thing. He is meant to be our kid. like, and in our family. And he would have been the oldest in their family, the only one at the time. And like I said, he was not, he's not meant to be the oldest or only child. But anyways, so that was just a more reassurance that like we had done the right thing and that he really was meant to be in our family. Like it all worked out how Heavenly Father wanted it to work out. For sure,
And
100%.
that's so beautiful. That's just amazing to be and to have that almost like concrete timeline of, people saying that and that, like to be able to connect those dots is also really
Mhm.
cool because sometimes people can't
Yeah.
and it makes
Well,
it that much
and like our
harder.
agency is super like hush hush, like they don't share anything else. So we had no idea he had been presented to another family. But yeah, so yeah, to have that like that experience and to blow up on Instagram the way that I did has had more positives than negatives, like there's been families that have contacted me since and they're like, "We have always wanted to adopt. Can you tell us how to start?" Or there is a family right now who found us right when we got home with Benson, and they actually are working with our same agency to adopt from Liberia. But that's a whole other story because since the last 2 years, Liberia's been questioned. Anyways, no adoptions are currently happening in Liberia because
Interesting.
they're claiming that our agency and another agency in Liberia were trafficking.
And that there's so many of those, like they're not even just within adoption, but there's just so many of those allegations that happen all over. It's like hard to know.
Well, the craziest thing is this is our government
Right.
that's causing these issues. It's not
Right.
even the Liberian government. So it started because this family was adopting 2 little girls, and our government claimed that they weren't eligible to be adopted. Never mind the fact that our agency does all this work to ensure that it's straightforward, supposedly, I guess. I don't really know. And then the Liberian government goes back and they do their own investigation, and now, anyways, it's awful. So I don't know if they're even going to get to adopt, but
I wonder how common that is of like it changing like that. Like I know you said that there's some that don't that you can't, but I wonder how common it is for it to come up like that and then just like be closing
yeah, I
those
don't
like
know.
or severing those ties.
Yeah, I don't know. It breaks my heart because, like, I've met most of the kids that need homes in there, but it has been fun too because I've had other people reach out and they're like, "Oh, I think that you adopted from the same agency. We just got matched with so and so," and so I went back into my pictures from the orphanage, and I'm like, "I think like." This is your like, and so I would send them like pictures or videos I had of their kids in my pictures. So it's been fun.
That's cool. So it's like a whole like there's like more community also built into it, which I think
Yeah.
probably isn't thought about either, like the connections that come just from being involved in the adoption communities.
Yeah. Well, and the Liberian community, like our agency that we used is based out of Tennessee. And so we actually went back there 2 years ago because there was another family that was in Africa with us that adopted two boys. They weren't little. And they live just outside Nashville. And so we're like, oh, it'd be so fun to go and see them. We've always wanted to go to Tennessee. And so while we were out there on the Liberian adoption Facebook page, I just put, hey, our family's coming from Utah. We'd love to like get together with as many people as out there. Cause there's quite a few just because the agency is based out of there. So that was super fun. So we like met up at a park one night when we were there with like 5, 6 other families with their kids from Liberia. And then there were like 3 families who were in the process of adopting kids from Liberia. And anyways, it was pretty
It's
cool.
so cool. And I bet it makes the kids also feel very seen and like it helps them not feel so singled out. Cause sometimes, kids are adopted and then they end up in communities where not a lot of people are. And then they feel, very lonely in that. So I imagine that's also not only empowering for the parents, but also empowering for the
Yeah,
kids.
and I'm sure it is. And poor Benson, that's the kind of community that we live in. Like there's not a lot of adopted kids here.
Right. Yeah. When it comes to transition and like just getting into the groove and having a new family member, what would you say was the hardest part of that?
Patience. We really had to learn patience. Benson threw some pretty hellacious fits at the beginning, and I mean from like day 1, day 2 probably. Day 1 was pretty like we were all on a high. Day 2, he like would throw a fit and like we could not console him and he wouldn't talk to us to tell us what was wrong and we would try and like put him in the bedroom and close the door and he would scream harder. And again, so then it's like trying to process what trauma he's had because we don't know his history. We don't know, if he had been abused. We don't know anything. So it's like the patience of just letting him scream and cry and not losing our cool
Right.
And that went on for probably 6 months, and it got progressively better. It was the worst in Africa. And what's crazy is like one time the place that we stayed in Africa had a pool. Like we did that on purpose so that because we knew our kids were going to be so bored. And he threw a fit at the pool. And there was a Liberian man sitting in a chair a little ways away. And he called him over and he was like talking to him in his Liberian accent. And Benson instantly like stopped. We were like, the heck, man? Like, doesn't matter what my husband or I said to him, if we were loving, if we were ticked, but he was like so stern, and Benson just turned it off. And as he's talking to him, Benson's like shaking his head, yes. Like, I was like, what the heck? Yeah. So that was the hardest, was just being patient, working through like his adjustment, his fits. That
Right.
was really hard.
Did you notice any, as you were saying this, I was thinking, like his past and then also the things that might come up for you guys, like what might trigger you more that you maybe didn't realize. Did anything like that come up where you noticed something was harder for you than just, the usual, like knowing that he's going through these things? Was there any triggers that came out for you that you maybe didn't know before?
I think we looked at his fits as like disrespectful, and we don't do disrespect at our house. And so like I said, when he would throw his fit, he would shut down and he would just stare blankly. And we would be like, Benson, you need to talk, use your words, tell us what's wrong, especially going like a few months after being home. And so he was more comfortable with us and stuff. Like that made us so mad. Like, just talk, tell us what's wrong, and he would just shut down. And so we would lose our cool a lot faster when he would do that. And that's not something that I think we thought of, and again, like we know a little bit of his story. We don't talk about it, like that's his story to share one day. But given what we do know, he really didn't suffer or have awful trauma, which we're super grateful for, because he could have.
How do you know where, especially at such a young age, how do you know where he's still learning to talk in general? And then, not knowing how his little brain works, I can imagine that that would be really hard.
Well, and they speak English over there. I say that loosely
And he's
because
3, right?
yeah,
Like at the time. So it's like,
yeah. And so like we were driving home from the orphanage the first day, and we had our windows down and it was crazy talking everywhere. We said, my husband asked Albert, the guy that was driving us in the car, like, Albert, what language is that? And he was like, English. And we're like, no, Albert, that's not English. Like we have no idea what they're saying, So their interpretation of English is very lazy. So his Liberian name was Fode. He was born in a little town called Bensonville. So that's why we named him Benson, because it still, has this Liberian tie to it. But
right. That's cute.
so we were like, hey, how do we transition him, to be, so we can call him Benson? They say Fode. And so we would call him Fode and he wouldn't answer because we weren't saying it the way that he's been used to saying it. So we would go swimming and stuff and we would say, Benson Fode, like jump to me, or Benson Fode, like, so he would get used to it. And after about day 3, we just went straight to Benson because he recognized us saying that better than saying Fode, because the language, like it's the same language, but it is not the same. So that was another thing trying to work through, is like, he's trying to tell us, just like a typical 2-year-old, like he's trying to tell us something, but we don't understand him because, he
And there's like
speaks
that
with
added
Vietnamese.
layer. Yeah, the added layer of then also the dialects. I only have a very small understanding of that because I actually moved to Iowa from New York when I was like 10. And for the longest time, it was like I would say, like, for example, mascara. And people would be like, what? It's mascara. Or like, a huge thing here is like Italian and Italian. And it would drive me crazy as a kid. I'm like, why do you keep saying Italian? It's not Italian, but it's like just those little things of like that dialect. I could only imagine like if it wasn't even, we're in the same, I mean, we're essentially in the same space and the same culture here, but like then to have another culture trying to, grasp another language, like thankfully, he was little and it's, already hard to understand kids, but
He's adjusted really well. And there are actually Liberian words that we still use today. Like, and my boys have done a series on Instagram of this, of like, they call lotion cream. So we don't call lotion anymore. We call it cream. They call, what are some of the others? I can't think off the top of my head now. Cream. Bicycle is a cycle. Soda is soft drink. Can I have a soft drink?
yeah.
So, and like we use the Liberian words now instead of the American words.
Yeah.
So, anyways,
That's
and it's
fun.
fun. Like their culture is a beautiful culture, and like learning their culture has been super fun, you know. So, and I get a lot, like I said, I get a lot of hate. We've been called white saviors. There's a Instagram page that I'm not going to say the name of it because they don't need attention, but they blasted us, like took screenshots of things and blasted us, and I got so much hate. I almost went private, and then I was like, this is what the adversary wants. Like I'm sharing my family, I'm sharing like good, you know, and then I get blasted and get all this hate. And if I were to go private, that would my good would be stopped being shared with so many people. So I didn't, but it's been eye-opening to see what people think of.
I always say to my husband, like, if the trolls come out or the hate, if you start getting hate, you're doing something right.
Something right.
And so I definitely try to like position my perspective on anything like that because, like you said, if you went private, it stifles your message and it stifles all that good that people are getting. And so it's like it sucks to have to endure it, but at the same time, like with a rise in hate, it might be quieter, but there's also a rise in the good and the people seeing it and who need more of those messages. And they might not be engaging like the hateful people are,
Well, and
but
like
they're getting those messages.
the hate that I get too is like, I don't know how to properly care for his skin,
Oh, yeah.
or I don't know the proper way to take care of his hair. Like I have a reel right now that I shared that of me doing his hair. My gosh. The opinions people have of how I do his hair. Like, I'm getting called out for washing it in the sink. What's wrong with you, white people? Like, what do you want me to do? Get in the shower with him? I'm like, come on.
Right. And
But
it's such petty little things too. Like you couldn't Google, there's not
yeah.
hairdressers, like there's
Well,
not
my
other
thing
ways
is
of,
like, if you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. Didn't your mom
right.
teach you that? You would not say this to me face to face. You're hiding behind a keyboard. And I'm really good at like letting it go. Like say whatever you're going to say. I usually will have somebody that goes and fights for me. Like I don't even have to say anything. But some days, like day before yesterday, somebody commented and I must have been feeling feisty because I commented back. But
Some
I've
days it
gotten
happens.
really good at blocking. And a lot of the times I'll just comment, thanks for the engagement.
Yeah. Right.
Like, thanks, my stuff's being seen more because you're commenting on it. So that's
Right.
great.
My sister runs social media. She loves telling people to pop off. Like, okay, go ahead. Like, and then when you don't engage, like, it's like it becomes its whole thing, and makes them stew more. But
Yeah, sometimes like I said, most of the time I just let it go. I'm like, you can think everybody's entitled to their own opinion, but I'm like, no.
but not everyone has to state it everywhere.
Dude, it's craziness.
I want to honor your time, so I won't keep you too much longer. But I do want to kind of touch on. You mentioned that disrespect was something that came up for you, and so I guess it's kind of a couple. It's like two questions. Like one, how did you reposition that perspective to meet him where he was, and then also, were there any cycles that you guys had seen or patterns in the way your family or your family's family had handled things that maybe needed to shift or that you recognized those patterns needed to change?
I think when it came to like his fits and all that, it was patience. And I think as he became more used to us, he realized, I don't want to say like he adapted to be more like us, but that's essentially almost what it was, like
You modeled
he
that behavior.
recognized,
Yeah.
yeah, like he recognized like MacGyver doesn't do this, or, and so I think that he just became, I think we just became more used with each other,
Right.
and
How did you
he
look at it as how did you break out of the like looking at it as disrespect? Like, was there a moment or was it just that as you guys grew, like it just started to go easier?
I just
Yeah.
think that we all grew and it all just became easier.
Right. And then looking back at it now, you can be like, oh, we were
Yeah.
looking at it as this when.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that
For
makes
sure.
sense.
For
That
sure.
makes total sense. Did anything change within your marriage when
No.
going through the process? No.
No. Like I said, this has been my dream since I was little.
Right.
And Brian knew that. And we had talked about it when we were dating in high school, that I wanted to adopt. And so he took hold of it and made it his dream too. Yeah, no, I don't think it changed our marriage. I think it's funny because him and Benson have a better relationship than Benson and I. And I think part of that is because Benson, he's home with me all day. So I do a
Right.
lot more of the disciplining.
Right.
And then dad would come home and be the fun one. And so they have a better relationship, but it didn't really affect our marriage. So,
I mean,
yeah.
that's always good because I feel like there's so many, like with changes, there comes a lot of hurdles and seasons that can be hard. So,
Yeah.
yeah, that's why I kind of wanted to ask if that was a thing. So, if there was anything, if there's someone listening who's either thinking about adoption or maybe just in that waiting game, just looking back at your journey and the whole process, what would you say to somebody listening? What one thing would you want them to take away from this?
Don't give up. I don't know. I just think that I know for me personally, relying on my faith and my savior and just the confirmation that we had gotten over and over that this was something we were supposed to do. I also think writing stuff down, I'm not a very good journaler, but I think having my Instagram and writing down like certain things that happened or things that I was like, okay, we're still on the right path. And then looking back at those in those times of waiting and self-doubt was super helpful. And if it's meant to be, it's going to happen. Like, he'll make a way for it to happen. And the waiting is awful, but being on this side of it, it was so worth it. Because like I said, even in the waiting, we waited a year to be matched with him from like the time all of our paperwork was done until we were matched with him. And so even in that, I think looking back, like it was supposed to be that way because he didn't get to the orphanage until, that December. And so, yeah, it's worth it. Just stick it out.
Where can people find you?
My Instagram is at Jessica Mandel, and I share a lot. I share adoption, I share just our story and just family stuff, like just showing the world that there's good, real families out there, Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. Jessica Mandel.
There was one more question I wanted to ask. What is one myth or one thing that people, I don't want to say necessarily a myth, but I guess just one misguidance that people have based on adoption that you just want that to die? What would you say that is? Or like something that you hear all the time about adoption that you're like, oh my gosh, please just stop with that.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. I think a misconception in adoption is that it's expensive, and I wish people wouldn't let that hold them back. Another one is that I get all the time like, well, you can't really bond with the child. That's not true either. And I'm not going to discredit the families. There are a ton of families who have issues bonding with children, and I get it. But also it can happen. It's possible. Like,
and having that belief that it won't happen just makes it that much harder too. So you're probably,
well, it's all about your mindset. Everything is about your mindset, like if you think like, oh, well, I'm never going to bond with them, then you're probably never going to bond with them.
Right. Yeah. Like the more people that are putting that message out there just makes people like scared to do it and question it so much more. And then it does make it hard. It's like that self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah. And that's with anything, that's not just adoption. Like if you go into a job and you think, oh, I'm not going to be very good at this, and you're probably not going to be very good at it.
Right. Exactly.
It's all about your mind shift. So
yes, 100%.
But yeah, I think the cost and just the fact that you're never going to bond the same as you do with your other kids. And I get accused of that too. Like, well, why'd you do that to the adopted kid? Or why'd you do that to the black kid or whatever? And it's like, dude, I treat all of my kids the same. You can ask them. In fact, if you ask most of my kids, they'll tell you Benson's the favorite because we worked the hardest to get him or spent the most money to get him. Oh, he's the baby. And he reminds us, Mom, I'm the baby of our family. Yes, you are. Because your siblings point that out to you, not because Mom does. Right. Like, you're all treated the same.
Well, I want to thank you for having this conversation because actually I definitely learned a lot. I did not realize before. So thank you for sharing this with me and
thank
being
you.
a part of this.